Welcome back to iSober, a platform where we can freely share our testimonies, experience strength and hope. Our goal is to help one another grow in recovery, build a strong community, and reach those who may still be struggling in addiction. Today we are honored to have a special guest joining us by phone. Everyone, please help me welcome Aron from Ohio. Aron.
Hi, hey, how you guys doing? So, addiction, I believe for me it started when I was young before I could even see it because looking back, I already had like those negative behaviors kind of ingrained to me like innately. Um, I don't remember much of my childhood, but when I was 12 is where I start to remember things, and coincidentally, that's when I started using. I started smoking and drinking around then, and like many of us, I would say it was to try to fill a void or try to, connect to get that feeling like you fit in, and because I always had like that lonely feeling. Even that young, I had that lonely feeling, and it was the one thing that connected me to other people.
No, yeah, that's
And
how it is for a lot of us. So let me ask you this. First, what areas were you raised around, coming up in your childhood?
in my childhood, I was born in Elyria, Ohio, and it's kind of like it's a city. It's a little city. It's kind of urban. I wouldn't say it's as bad as like Cleveland, but it's a little bit urban. But there's also like it's surrounded also by some rural areas. So I kind of like, jumped back and forth between the urban areas
Yeah,
and
that
like
sounds
some of
like
the
home to
farm
me.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so, okay, so and how was addiction in your family? Were you used to it? Were there family members in addiction for you? Was it a whole new type of thing?
Well, in my family, see, there were some drinkers. Um, Actually, my grandpa, he was a big, he was a big AAer, and but when I was young, he wasn't in AA. He was the only one in my family, but he was, a pretty hardcore alcoholic. And I would say that most of my family, they have alcoholic tendencies, but their life doesn't become unmanageable because of drinking, you
Yep,
know?
and that's the key right there. How you said it right there is exactly right. Some people can handle the substance and be normal with their everyday life. It's just when they do it alcoholically, your life becomes unmanageable. So we're very well put.
Yeah, yeah. And so, at least partying was kind of normalized for me, because we would have like bonfires on the weekends and the whole family would get around and they'd be drinking, like there would be a portion of them that would go off and sneak around and smoke weed, so when I was a teenager, they let me join in, but like I said, none of them really they were still able to have like functionable lives and be successful. All but me and my grandfather. He was the only other one that was, where things became, you know, chaotic for him and for me. And that's the only little bit of addiction that the only hint of addiction that I really saw. And to me, it wasn't even really apparent, and I was so young that, it just seemed normal to me. So all that stuff was normal. And then I was partying with them, and then I started partying with, friends from school. And slowly I was blind to the fact that my addiction was already like progressing. I started trying other drugs when I was 15, 16. Um, and it seemed normal to me because everybody was doing it. You know what I mean? I didn't think I was doing anything wrong, and up to this point, I didn't have any consequences. I didn't really start getting consequences till I was about, I don't know, 19, 20. Um, but that's like when my addiction really started to take off. That was the first time I tried heroin, and that took over my life for 20 years pretty much, you know. And as things progressed, I mean, all the other things kind of slowly faded into the background to where I stopped drinking and smoking completely, and all I did was the harder drugs, you know, heroin and the drugs that came around it. Um, and I started getting consequences for one, my moral compass started to slide down, and I was like, and a lot of it was because of the crowd I was hanging out with, but a lot of it was just because that's kind of inherent to addiction, you know. And like I said, I was still blind to it, but I was slowly doing things like starting to sell drugs or, you know, stealing from stores, but I wasn't doing it like on a need basis. I was really doing it because of my influences around me. Because like I said, I kind of had like an urban place with like some rural places around it, but I started hanging out like in the city a little more, you know, and a lot of my friends and a lot of my influences were into that stuff, and you know, uh, so once again, it seemed normal to me, and you know, I remember when the epidemic started, you know, the opiate epidemic started. This was like 2012. Um, I had tried heroin, but it hadn't like got a hold of me yet. And you would have to go all the way to Cleveland to go get it, right? Well, when the epidemic started, it started to be around in my city like it was like normal. So I started doing it on a regular basis, and I started selling it too. And like looking back at it now, I'm like I was so oblivious to the fact that, you know, like what I was doing was such a dangerous thing, or what I was also doing was putting other people in danger. Because before the opiate epidemic, I don't really think there was a lot of drug education on, like, I didn't even know what being dope sick was. You know, I didn't ever hear of people overdosing and dying. I mean, I know it was like a thing, but, you know, now that's almost common knowledge.
No,
But back
yeah.
then, you know,
Yeah, and I like how you're putting that while you're going through this addiction, you didn't know that it was an addiction yet. You know, you still felt as if it was a normal partying type of ordeal, because that's how it is for a lot of us. I really like how you're painting this picture for us.
yeah, so, but eventually that did come with, some consequences. I ended up, you know, starting to sell kind of a lot, and I got raided by the police, right? And that was like an eye opener in a lot of ways, because besides some traffic tickets and maybe like an OVI once, I had never been had a felony, I'd never been in trouble with the law like to that extent. And it was really the first, because I was like selling it and I had been doing it regular since then. That was the first time I was ever dope sick, when I went to jail. And man, I'll never forget that, because like, you know, they say it's like a week or something, but I was literally dope sick for like, I was doing so much. I was dope sick for almost like 20 days, like where I was like hallucinating and like convulsing and stuff. It was like the most terrible thing ever. And that's kind of when I first see, I didn't have this realization yet, but that's when people started to tell me I had a problem. And I started kind of being open to, yeah, maybe I need to stop, you know, not that I'm an addict, not all the things that come with it, like complete abstinence and, you know, staying within a growth mindset, to be able to, you know, change your whole life. Like, I didn't know anything about all that, but I did start to believe, like, okay, maybe I need to stop. And in my head, I thought, okay, well, I went through the dope sickness, so I'm good, you know. And little did I know that that was not how it was going down, you know. Um, Shortly after that, I probably only stayed clean for a few weeks, maybe a month. But I immediately, because I was used to having a lot of money, but because I was like selling drugs and all this other stuff. Like, so I started selling drugs again, and I'm like, you know what? Now that I'm off of it, I'll just make more money. And I'm still oblivious to the fact that what I'm doing is wrong. But like I said, I lasted longer than I thought. It was a few weeks, and I started using again. And man, it only lasted about a month, and I got arrested for trafficking again on a
And
secret indictment.
and around this time, are you being introduced? So you're trying to stay sober throughout this time, but are you being introduced to like any recovery programs, or are you just trying to do it on your own because you feel like it's just not right for your life? What led you to want to just stay sober those short periods?
Well, like the first time I got arrested, I thought I could do it on my own. Then, like I said, I thought I'm thinking I can do it. I start selling drugs. I fall back into it, and then I get arrested again. All right, when I get out of jail, I'm like, people are telling me like, dude, you got to get help, and then I'm like, all right, maybe I do need to get help. So then I went to rehab for the first time. I think I was 21 years old. Um, and that was like the first time I was introduced to, all the different ways that you could recover. I went to Glen Bay and they covered they covered the disease of addiction. They covered 12-step programs like AA and NA and, complete abstinence and, selflessness, being open-minded, all these things. And I'm hearing it, but I'm not absorbing it, I even, I thought I had it so much I left like a week early. I was there for maybe 21 days. I think I went 3 weeks. I didn't want to do the last week, And I remember my mom, she came to pick me up, and I remember she was like crying, and I just couldn't see what the big deal was, but she obviously could comprehend like the seriousness of the situation that like I'm an addict and I need help, and I can't even see how big of a deal it is that I'm not finishing the treatment when she knows the statistics are, even if I do finish the treatment, that, and I do try my hardest, I'm probably, going to end up relapsing. And because of the nature of my drug, I have a severe risk of, death or, and if not death, prison, So, looking back at that gives me some like it just gives me like some revelations, you know what I mean? Because of how oblivious I am and also to how tricky the disease can be, you know? Like, because it still took me a while. Still took me a while after that to realize like and to accept that I was a drug addict, and that it wasn't as easy as just putting it down and saying, I'm not doing this anymore. I mean, you do got to do that, but I mean, as comes with a whole lot of change and a whole lot of effort. Because, as they say, I've been in and out of 12-step programs for almost 20 years now, and one of the things I've heard a lot is, faith without works is dead. So you can't expect it to work if you don't work it, Um, and But yeah, I mean, everything went downhill from there after the rehab. I actually, after I got out of that rehab, the day later, it was the first time I ever overdosed. And that happens to a lot of people. They get out of rehab, their tolerance is down, and they overshoot their mark. And I knew that too because they warned us of that, especially with me leaving early. And I still did it, and I still tried to like do less than I normally would, and I still ended up overdosing for the first time. And little did I know that that would be one of many times, and I'm lucky to be alive. But I like to think that God or the universe or whatever has some sort of purpose for me, and that's how I survived all of it.
No, and that's for sure, man. That's you definitely have to look at it that way. It is divine intervention for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely do. And a big part of, I know a big part of me trying to get this is oh, sorry. I don't know but a big part of me trying to get this is like trying to be selfless and give back and really submerge myself into the sobriety world. Because, like I said, I I was this year. I'm in like 2 months. I'll have a year sober.
Oh wow,
But
that's awesome, man.
yeah, but I've had almost 2 years before, and but I can feel like the emotional maturity and the growth way more than even the times that the last time I was sober. Because they say when you go back, once you've gotten sober and you figure out like what you're supposed to do and like try to change and you initiate that change, you don't lose everything. You may regress like temporarily, but when you come back, at least, sometimes relapse is a part of recovery, like, and that's if you learn from it, which I did, you know, I did learn from my last relapse. So,
And that's where a lot of people get lost is relapse is not a part of recovery, it's a lack of recovery. So it sounds like you went back, you put in the work, and you figured out, where you went wrong.
yeah. So I like to like attribute that to, you know, 12-step programs taught me my foundation of the things that I had to do to stay sober. Like it taught me selflessness. It taught me to be open-minded and take suggestions. It taught me to try to seek a purpose, higher power. Um, it taught me to try to right my wrongs and to practice acceptance and all that good stuff. But this time I've been going to like trauma therapy and I've been doing like cognitive behavioral uh, treatment where I learn more about emotional regulation and like specific coping skills. And I really think that was like, one of the last pieces of the puzzle to me because that was a lot of the things that would take me out during my stints of sobriety where I would feel stable and I really thought I'd never use again. And then something tragic would happen in my life and I would not be able to handle it and then that that need for relief would eventually drive me, and it wouldn't even, when I say eventually, I just mean like within a couple weeks, whether it be grief or betrayal. Those seem to be the two feelings that really did a number on me. But those are the things where I would emotionally act impulsive, and then not know how I got there, and then was like, wow, did I just throw all this sobriety, all this work away? And then that realization, like I didn't even want to get high. It was just like kind of an ingrained behavior that because I didn't know how to handle these emotions. I didn't know how to handle that intense pain, and I'd never went through it before. And that was one of the things looking at my relapse cycles that I had to figure out. Like I had to figure out, okay, look, I know how to change, I know how to start growing, but look at what took me out. So I had to start trying to figure out how to um, handle my emotions and get a better understanding of myself. You know what I mean? And mindfulness, and just awareness of, the correlation between my emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, and that along with all the stuff that I've learned from, 12-step programs, I feel pretty solid, and I feel like really content in my like I feel really good about it, and I'm happy where I'm at. I know that, we always have work to do. And another thing that I've learned is, trying to keep a growth mindset, right? Which to me is like you can always be better. You can always be working towards being better. And if you're doing that, then there's no threshold. And if you're moving in that direction, as long as I'm moving in that direction, I'm moving farther away from a relapse.
No, yeah, that makes perfect sense, man. I like that. Well, I really like your story, man. I guess I could ask you a couple questions, and then I think we've about covered it.
Okay, cool.
How was your relationship with your higher power while you were in addiction versus how it's now?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I was let's just say it was inconsistent and doubtful. I went, during addiction in the beginning, I was kind of always like I didn't really know what I believed, but I knew that it was like normal to believe in God. So when all this bad stuff started to happen to me, I would just be mad at God, you know? Um, and that never got me anywhere. Eventually, through like all the pain and misery and, you know, consequences over and over, and the feeling of like, just plummeting self-esteem during like this whole uh this whole downward spiral into addiction, like for my whole life, I I started to believe that there was no God. And then I even it was so ingrained to me that that was the thing, that I would even look up scientific like theories on the universe, and it really was like I stood on it, that like I believed that there was no God. And even in my like early sobriety, and when I say early sobriety, I mean the couple times that I was trying, because uh and that I had like some success with change and growth. Even in those, I kind of held on to that. You know what I mean? I held on to it for a little bit. But I learned to become open-minded. That's one of the biggest things they teach you, is to be open-minded, you know what I mean? Because one of the things that is like an innate trait of addicts is to be defiant against suggestions or authority, and it really holds us back from, wisdom and, just any kind of knowledge, or like what any potential like um what am I saying? Like potential avenues that might open something up for you, you know? So I started to finally try to like open that back up, and I was like, okay, maybe maybe there is a God, and maybe I just need to, just whatever my beliefs are, realize that it was formed by years of, trauma and distorted thinking that was all adapted you know, uh, by a lifestyle that was like, that required that. And so that kind of thought, and I just kind of, I don't want to say fake it till you make it, but I tried to open myself up, and I started actually believing in a higher power. Now, I still think I have like a more vague uh, conception of a higher power, but I think that's also the beauty of 12-step programs, is it can be whatever your belief is. And I really do think that the power of belief, regardless of what it is the thing that really helps you. Just knowing that something's out there, you know what I mean? Something's out there that's going to help guide you. Doesn't matter really what your conception of it is. But today I do pray. I wouldn't say I pray daily, but I almost pray daily. You know, I pray in tough times. I pray in, when good things happen, and I try to pray just because. And I pray when we do the serenity prayer, and I try to, pray for, the people that still don't have that realization that they need help, because I do realize this is a disease, and I've lost a lot of friends, and I still have a lot of loved ones out there. You know what I mean? And it's a sad thing, because you really do need that, at least acceptance, before you can, before you can get anywhere into this path.
No, I 100% agree, man. I really like how you put things. All right. So as a final thought, what is a closing message that you would give to someone who is perhaps trying to stay sober and they can only do it 1 month at a time? They try to do it by themselves and they can't, and they keep relapsing. What would be a final message for someone out there struggling still?
I would just say, I would just say, don't stop coming back. Try to learn from your relapses. And if you really just try to be better every day, um, and try to keep a growth mindset, then you can only head in one direction. Just keep coming back. Just keep coming back because a lot of people give up before the miracle happens, and
Yeah.
that's a tragedy.
No, and that is a cliche, keep coming back. It works if you work it, but man, it works for a reason. And it's a
Yeah,
cliche for a reason. You're very right.
yeah, yeah.
As we wrap up another episode of I Sober, we want to thank Aron for sharing his experience, strength, and hope with us. Recovery is possible, and stories like these remind us no matter how far we've gone, there is always a way back. If you're struggling today, know that you're not alone. Reach out and ask for help and keep coming back. There is a community of people who understand and are willing to walk this journey with you. If you'd like to share your testimony on a future episode of I Sober, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out and connect with us. Your story could be the message that helps someone else find hope. Until next time, stay grateful, stay connected, and remember, one day at a time, this is I Sober signing off.